Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Dark Knight and its mitigation. A few days ago we talked about Warrior and how Warrior is specialized in healing up quite a bit of the damage that it takes. Well, Dark Knight is the complete opposite in the sense that it just straight up prevents a lot of the damage that you will be taking, mainly through the usage of the Blackest Night. So let's take a look at the mitigation that Dark Knight has available to them, why I think it is really strong, and why I think it is actually the strongest tank when it comes to mitigating damage. When we take a look at the ultimate cooldown from Dark Knight, which is Living Dead, I think it is on one hand the worst, but on the other hand also the easiest to use cooldown. The reason why it is easy to use is because the Walking Dead effect only really triggers when you die, so you don't need to have perfect timing like you might need to have on a home gang, or for example with Paladin, a hallowed ground, because certain tank busters are really tight when it comes to that 10-second window, especially in ultimate. But with Dark Knight you just pop it, and then when you die eventually, that's when the 10 seconds kicks in. So on that hand, Living Dead is really good because it's easy to use and it's really difficult to miss time. But on the other hand, it does eat a lot of healing resources. If you have a White Mage, Benediction makes this kind of void, so it's pretty good. But if you don't have a White Mage, or the White Mage doesn't have Benediction available to them, then it is going to be taking a lot of healing resources to make sure that your Dark Knight doesn't die. So that's why I am not a huge fan of Living Dead. On one hand it's really good because of the ease of use, on the other hand it is costing your healers quite a lot. So that's why I have a little bit mixed feelings about Living Dead. But to make up for that, Dark Knight does have access to the best cooldown suite in the game when it comes to mitigating damage. The main two reasons for those are Dark Mind and the Blackest Night. So let's take a look at those two first, and then see how it kind of comes into big picture into the fight that I am showing right here. I chose E2S because E2S is the perfect example of a Dark Knight's strength in mitigation, because the tank busters come in very short intervals, but not too short either, meaning that I'm going to be able to rotate in between my two major cooldowns, those being Rampart and Shadow Wall. But you'll also see that they are long enough apart from each other so that I can have a Dark Mind on every single one of them as well, on top of another Blackest Night too. So that's why Dark Knight's really strong in this fight. If I were to be main tanking, I would be using Rampart more as a auto attack mitigation, just for the passive mitigation, rather than just for tank busters, because Dark Mind on itself is already enough for the tank buster, and on top of that we also have TBN, and then in this case also a Rampart or a Shadow Wall, because I am in that off-tank position. One thing I do have to say is that I am not a very experienced Dark Knight, so the gameplay is not as amazing as it could be. I'm also making quite a few mistakes. Technically I should be using my TBN on the main tank when there's like rate-wide damage and stuff like that, so that our healers don't really have to care about him too much, because he's still taking auto attacks whilst the rate-wide damage is going out. So it would be really beneficial for us if I were to use TBN on him. But of course, don't play Dark Knight much. I didn't have a macro setup either to give my co-tank the TBN, so in general I didn't really do it that much, or don't even think I do it even once in this gameplay, but I should have been doing that. So if you're learning Dark Knight, make it something that you do, and don't make the same mistakes that I do. Do as I say, not as I do. But going back to Dark Mind and the Blackest Night. So Dark Knight, Dark Mind is Dark Knight's special mitigation cooldown. Each tank has their own. Paladin doesn't have any. Warrior has Thrill of Battle, and then Gunbreaker has Camouflage, and then Dark Knight has Dark Mind. Now the reason why Dark Mind is so strong is twofold. So first of all, it is 20% mitigation. If we compare it to Gunbreaker, Gunbreaker's is 10. It does give you 50% of parry, but parry is only for physical attacks, and it is also a percent chance, so it's not guaranteed mitigation. So when we look at Camouflage in my eyes is just 10% mitigation. When we look at Warrior, it's 20% HP, so technically 20% mitigation, because it also gives you that healing buff on top of it. And then Dark Knight has 20% magical mitigation. The magical part is really important because this does not work on physical damage. So if we compare it, it is kind of on the same strength as Warrior's Thrill of Battle, a little bit weaker because it's only for magic damage, but on the other hand, it is available to us way more often because it's on a 1-minute cooldown, whereas all of the other special mitigations, Camouflage and Thrill of Battle, are on 90 seconds. So we'll be able to use this a lot more over the course of a fight, especially if it's a long fight as well. So because of this, we can kind of take a look at what we are doing for each and every tank buster. When we take a look at, for example, the warrior in this case, warrior can use Thrill of Battle plus Rampart for the first one, and then they can use Vengeance for the second. And then it's up to them to make the choice in between Raw Intuition for those tank busters as well, or to use Nascent Flesh. Now, if I remember correctly, the warrior was using Nascent Flesh quite a bit. I can actually check that real quick because I do have the log open. Well, 3 Nascent Flesh usages. Okay, maybe not that much. So he mainly was using Raw Intuition for these tank busters, which is good to know, because we're going to be comparing the damage that I was taking from tank busters against him as well. So knowing that he used Raw Intuition for most of them is very important, because then it's going to look even better for our Dark Knight. So in general, you have your Rampart, plus your Special Mitigation, plus your Spammable Mitigation for each tank. When it comes to the second tank buster, you have your 30%, in this case being Vengeance for the warrior, plus your Spammable Mitigation, Raw Intuition. Now, when it comes to Dark Knight actually has so much more, because they have that Rampart, they have their Special Mitigation, which is Dark Mind, and then they have the Blackest Night, which is the strongest Spammable Mitigation in the game. Now, the reason why is because it not just mitigates this damage, it actually prevents damage as well, and that's going to make it so that I'm going to be taking so much less damage from these tank busters. Now, because Dark Mind is only on a 1-minute cooldown instead of a 90-second one, it also means that I'll be able to use it for every single tank buster instead of every second tank buster. So instead of me using Rampart Dark Mind TBN and then using Shadow Wall TBN, I can actually use Shadow Wall TBN and Dark Mind there as well. So I'm going to be have Dark Mind. Wow, can't get out of my words. So I'll be having Dark Mind for every single tank buster, on top of either 20% from Rampart or 30% from Shadow Wall, on top of a 25% shield from the Blackest Night. This makes it so that Dark Knight is insanely strong when it comes to personal mitigation on this fight, and I'll show that in numbers real quick as well. So if you take a look at the damage that me and the warriors took from these tank busters in general numbers, the warriors took about 60,000 damage from the tank busters on average. It's rounded out. I, on the other hand, took 25,000 damage from all of these tank busters. If we compare that, that's about a 50-55% like extra damage mitigated just because of the Blackest Night. Of course, the Blackest Night isn't only used on tank busters. As I said before, you can use it for those rate-wide damaging attacks as well, meaning that healers will have to heal you less. For example, the flares are a good part because usually the tanks kind of end up dropping low there as well, if they don't get extra care because one of the healers is all the way on the other side of the map. So that's where TBN can come in clutch as well. Of course, for normal rate wides helps quite a bit as well. So I think the Blackest Night is just amazing overall, not only for mitigating tank busters but also for raid wides and such like that, because it is free. As long as it pops, it is free mitigation, and it is very strong mitigation as well because it is damage prevention rather than just damage mitigation. So that's why I think Dark Knight is really strong. Of course, you still have your other stuff like Dark Missionary, Reprisal, that kind of stuff for when it comes to team-wide mitigation. But in general, when it comes to personal mitigation, I think Dark Knight is the best. If you're looking for a tank to just mitigate damage, play Dark Knight. Of course, when you do need to use your Living Dead, it is a little bit weaker in my opinion. But as long as you have a White Mage with Benediction ready, it is still fine as well. So that's going to be it for me. Want to talk a bit about Dark Knight, kind of give my opinion on its defensive toolkit and why I think it is amazing. And yeah, that's going to be it for me. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.